The cockpit screamed, not the alarms, though they were shrieking in overlapping frequencies, a choir of mechanical agony. Not the hull, though it was groaning like a dying animal as atmospheric pressure bled into vacuum. Not even the targeting computer, which had been wailing lock warning, lock warning, lock warning for the last 11 minutes. No. The cockpit itself screamed. Metal twisting, compensators failing, the smell of burnt insulation and something worse, copper, thick and wet, filling his helmet. Blood. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thorne didn't know whose. Viper 7, this is command. You are ordered to eject. Repeat. Thorne's thumb found the comm cutout. He didn't need the distraction. His eyes were fixed on the holographic display flickering before him, the one showing the Vanaki's Hope, a converted colony tender. Armor plating welded onto civilian hull plating. Civilian hull plating welded onto Hope itself. Behind it, trailing like sharks who'd tasted blood, 17 serpentine interceptors. And between them and the orphanage ship, one fighter. One severely damaged, shieldless, half-blind, nearly out of missiles, leaking reactor coolant somewhere behind his seat fighter. Him. Viper 7, do you copy? You have sustained critical damage. Ejection is mandatory. Your survival probability. Thorne killed that channel too. He knew the numbers. He'd watched them spiral downward for 23 minutes, ever since the first ambush. Ever since the Vanaki's Hope had limped out of the Lornis Rift with 3 escort destroyers burning behind it and 17 hungry hostiles closing fast. The other escorts were gone. 2 human pilots had ejected. 1 hadn't ejected in time. Thorne's probability of surviving the next 5 minutes, according to the computer's cold calculation, 4.7%. Probability of the Vanaki's Hope surviving without him, 0%. Funny how math worked. Viper 7, this is Captain Yarrow. I am ordering you, Lieutenant Commander. Thorne opened the channel. His voice came out calm. So calm, it surprised him. Command, I'm receiving you broken and intermittent. Recommend you boost your signal through the relay network. The ship lurched. Something detonated close, too close, and the entire cockpit went red for 3 seconds as proximity warnings merged into a single sustained shriek. Busy for the next few minutes. He cut the channel again. The orphanage ship was a kilometer ahead, its engines glowing an angry orange, pushing past tolerances that would have made any engineering corps weep. It was a miracle it still flew. It was a miracle any of them were still alive. 17 interceptors, 2 wings, staggered formation spreading to bracket the Hope from above and below. Thorne's hand moved across the weapons panel. 3 missiles left, 2 working cannons. 1 working engine nozzle, the other had been slagged by a glancing hit, which meant his yaw control was compromised, which meant he turned like a dying whale, which meant he had to make every shot count. He shoved the throttle forward. The fighter screamed in protest, vibrations rattling through his bones, but it answered. It always answered. What is he doing? A voice whispered over the open channel. It was the Vanaki caretaker. Thorne had forgotten the Hope kept a tactical channel open, listening, hoping for good news. They'd heard everything. They'd heard command order him to leave. Thorne keyed the channel. I'm doing my job. You're going to die. Maybe. He pulled the fighter into a climbing turn, felt the damaged nozzle fight him, corrected with counter-thrust and pure stubbornness. But not before they do. Below him, the Vanaki's Hope filled his view. Its hull was a patchwork of desperation, different metals welded together, scorch marks from previous fights, a name painted in 4 languages across the bow. And behind those armored plates, behind those bulkheads, behind those hastily reinforced hatches, 247 children. The last Vanaki children. The last of a species that had once filled 3 star systems, now reduced to a single ship and a handful of survivors scattered across Allied space. The Serpentines had hunted them for 6 months. Systematic, relentless, efficient. Every Vanaki outpost, every colony, every refuge found and destroyed. The Vanaki's Hope was the last major concentration of their kind, and the Serpentines had finally cornered it. Thorne had been assigned to the escort fleet 3 weeks ago. He'd watched the orphanage ship dock with the destroyer Intrepid for resupply. He'd seen the children in the observation bay, small, pale, with 2 large eyes and 2 quiet voices. They'd pressed their hands against the glass, watching the human warship with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. One of them had waved at him. Thorn had waved back. He didn't think about that now. He thought about the interceptors. The lead serpentine broke formation, accelerating toward him with contemptuous ease. Their ships were organic grown, not built with carapace hulls that absorbed cannon fire and talons that could tear through human armor plating. They didn't use missiles. They didn't need to. They just swarmed and ripped and fed on the wreckage. Thorn had seen what they left behind. He wouldn't let them leave that here. "All right," he muttered, pulling up the targeting solution. "Let's see how you like this." The lead interceptor fired its main weapon, a pulse of focused plasma that lit up his threat detector like a supernova. Thorn didn't dodge. He couldn't. With his maneuverability shot, any evasive action would just bleed speed and make him an easier target. Instead, he flew straight into it. The plasma stream missed by 2 meters, close enough to melt a groove along his upper fuselage, close enough to make his cockpit temperature spike by 15 degrees, close enough to trigger a new chorus of alarms, but it missed. And Thorn was through the stream, inside the interceptor's minimum engagement range, before the serpentine pilot could react. 2 missiles. Tandem launch. The first stripped shields what few shields the serpentine carried, and the second punched through the exposed hull and detonated inside. The interceptor came apart in a spray of fragmented carapace and venting atmosphere. Thorn flew through the debris cloud, felt chunks of alien ship ping off his canopy, and emerged on the other side with his remaining missile count reduced by 2, and his heart rate spiking past 140. 16. Viper 7. Command's voice crackled through, barely audible over the static. "Are you insane?" "Maybe," Thorn said again. "But I'm not dead yet." The remaining interceptors reacted. Their formation shifted. 3 broke off to chase him, while the rest continued their pursuit of the Hope. Smart. Tactically sound. They'd learned from the first war, adapted to human tactics, understood that the fighter was just a distraction. They were wrong. Thorn wasn't a distraction. He was the trap. The 3 interceptors chasing him were faster, more agile, more everything. But they were also predictable. Serpentine pilots fought the same way their ships were built, aggressively, instinctively, without variation. They'd kill 1,000,000 humans the same way they'd killed the first one. Thorn had studied their tactics, had memorized their formations, had spent 6 months in sims learning exactly how to exploit their weaknesses. He pulled up hard, bleeding speed, letting the interceptors overshoot. One of them corrected too slowly. Thorn's remaining cannon found its engine cluster, and a 3-second burst turned organic thrust into organic confetti. The second interporter swerved, trying to bring its plasma cannon to bear. Thorn didn't give it time. He rolled into a dive, ignoring the protests from his damaged control surfaces, and slammed his last missile into its belly. The explosion was beautiful. It was also blinding, and Thorn flew through the fireball with his eyes squeezed shut and his hands locked on the controls, praying that the heat wouldn't melt through his canopy. It didn't, but when he opened his eyes, the 3rd interceptor was already on his tail, plasma charging, targeting locked. "Eject," a small voice said. Not command, not the tactical channel. The children's channel. Thorn had forgotten he'd patched into it 3 days ago, when the Venaki kids had asked to hear human music. He'd played them old Earth recordings, classical guitar, Ella Fitzgerald, something called heavy metal, that had made them cover their ears and laugh. One of them was on the channel now. A girl. Her voice was small and scared and impossibly young. "Please eject," she said. "We don't want you to die." Thorn's throat tightened. "I'm not going to die," he said. The interceptor fired. Thorn slammed his emergency thrusters, the ones reserved for last-ditch maneuvers, the ones that would burn out his remaining engine if he used them for more than 3 seconds. He fired them for 4. The plasma stream missed. The engine screamed. Warning lights painted the cockpit in shades of red Thorn had never seen before. but he was still flying. And the interceptor was now in front of him, its crew shocked by the impossible maneuver, its pilot scrambling to reacquire the target. Thorn didn't give them time. His cannons found their mark, not the engine cluster, not the cockpit, but the thin connective tissue between the main body and the left wing. Serpentine ships were grown, not built, which meant they had biological weak points. That connective tissue was one of them. A 4-second burst and the wing separated from the fuselage. The interceptor spiraled out of control, its pilot screaming something in their native language that Thorn didn't need translated. He didn't watch it crash. 13. Viper 7. Command again, stronger now, the signal finally punching through. You have 0 missiles. Your cannons are down to 12% ammunition. Your engine is critically damaged. Your shields have been offline for... I know my status, Captain. And there are 13 enemy fighters converging on the orphanage ship. You cannot... I know. Thorn opened the tactical channel to the Vanaki's Hope. He heard breathing fast, terrified, and somewhere in the background, a child crying. Caretaker, he said. What's your status? A pause. Then the caretaker's voice, older, female, exhausted beyond measure. We have lost our main propulsion. We are attempting to reroute power to secondary thrusters, but it will take... How long? 8 minutes. Thorn looked at his display. 13 interceptors, 1 dying fighter, an orphanage ship with no engines drifting toward a gravity well that would tear it apart in 15 minutes. I'll get you 8 minutes, he said. Lieutenant Commander. The caretaker's voice cracked. You cannot, I'll get you 8 minutes, he repeated. Get those engines online. He cut the channel before she could argue. The interceptors had stopped chasing him. They'd realized correctly that he was no longer a threat. Their plasma cannons could kill the Hope from range, and without his missiles, without his shields, without anything resembling real firepower, Thorn smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. He pulled up the star chart. The Hope was drifting toward a debris field, the remains of a destroyed space station, killed in the first year of the war, its shattered components scattered across 100 kilometers of vacuum. 13 interceptors, a debris field, 1 damaged fighter and 2% cannon ammunition. Time to go hunting, he whispered. The debris field was chaos. Thorn had flown through asteroid belts, through battle wreckage, through storms of shrapnel that would have torn apart lesser pilots. But this was different. The station had been a manufacturing hub, its components dense and irregular, twisted metal and shattered alloys and frozen atmosphere forming a labyrinth of death. The interceptors couldn't follow him here. Their ships were too large, too rigid, grown for open space combat. They could navigate debris, yes, but not like this. Not at the speeds Thorn was pushing. He pulled the fighter into a tight spiral, weaving between 2 spinning reactor housings, skimming past a section of hull that still had emergency lights flickering, and emerged into a small clearing. Behind him, 3 interceptors tried to follow. The first slammed into a support strut and came apart like an egg hitting concrete. The second tried to brake, but its organic instincts overrode its pilot's commands. It veered left, then right, then clipped a debris field that shredded its engines. The third, smarter, or maybe just luckier, pulled up and climbed out of the debris, rejoining the main formation. 11. Viper 7. The caretaker's voice, strained. We have primary thrusters online. ETA to minimum safe distance is... How far? 8,000 kilometers. We cannot achieve that before the gravity well pulls us in. Thorn checked his display. The Hope was moving slowly, painfully, its damaged engines pushing it toward safety. But the interceptors were moving too. They'd spread out, encircling the ship, waiting for the right moment to strike. They're hurting you, Thorn said, pushing you toward the gravity well. They don't want to kill you, not yet. Then what do they want? Thorn didn't answer. He was looking at the lead interceptor, the biggest one, the one with command markings on its carapace. It was hanging back, watching, coordinating, and it was broadcasting. Not on human frequencies, not on Vanaki frequencies, on something else, something encrypted, something Thorn's systems couldn't decode. But his comms could intercept it. And what he heard made his blood run cold. Secure the biological assets. The Council requires live specimens. Termination of adult hosts is authorized, but the young must be retrieved intact. Thorne's hands tightened on the controls. They didn't want to destroy the orphanage ship. They wanted to capture it, capture the children. We need to go dark, he said, keying the Venaki channel. Cut your engines, go silent. They're tracking your emissions. We cannot. If we cut engines, we will drift into the gravity well. Cut your engines. Silence. Then the Hope's drive signature vanished from his display. The interceptors reacted instantly. Their formation broke confusion, hesitation, their commanders trying to reacquire the target. But the debris field was cluttered with signals, reflections, false echoes. Without the Hope's engine flare to guide them, Thorne— The girl's voice again, small, terrified. Yes? Are we going to die? Thorne closed his eyes for half a second. Just half. Long enough to remember why he was here. Long enough to remember the wave through the glass, the two quiet voices. The way the children had pressed their hands against the observation bay. No, he said, you're not going to die. But you are. He didn't answer. The interceptors found the Hope 7 minutes later. Thorne had known they would. The ship's power systems, even running silent, leaked enough heat to be detectable at close range. The Serpentines were methodical. They'd sweep the debris field grid by grid until they found their prize. He'd used those 7 minutes to prepare. His fighter was parked behind a section of station hull, enough cover to hide his heat signature, enough clearance to launch when the time came. His cannons were down to 6% ammunition. His engine was held together by prayer and combat tape. His oxygen was at 11 minutes, maybe less, because a slow leak in his cockpit seals was bleeding atmosphere into space. He'd stopped the leak by pressing his gloved hand against the crack and holding it there. His left hand, the one he needed to fly. Command, he said, opening a channel. I need a status update on reinforcements. Silence. Command, this is Viper 7, do you copy? More silence. Then Captain Yarrow's voice, faint, distant, barely cutting through the static. Viper 7, reinforcements, not coming. Fleet command, aborted mission, the political cost. The channel dissolved into static. Thorne stared at his comm display. Aborted mission. They'd been abandoned. The escort fleet, the destroyers, the reinforcements, none of them were coming. Command had decided that the Venaki weren't worth the cost. That 247 children weren't worth the political fallout of a conflict with the Serpentine Empire. Thorne had suspected. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but he'd known. The moment the other escorts had turned back, the moment the Hope had been left with just one fighter for protection, he'd known. Sir, the caretaker's voice, barely a whisper. Did you say aborted? Thorne didn't answer. Sir, please. They're not coming, he said quietly. It's just us. A long pause, then, softer than before. The children are asking about the music. Thorne blinked. What? From 3 days ago, the human music. They keep asking if you can play it again. They said it made them feel less afraid. Thorne's hand, the one not pressed against the cockpit crack, reached for his data slate. He'd downloaded those songs. He'd meant to play them again. Meant to teach the children more. Meant to. It didn't matter what he'd meant. Can't play music right now, he said. I'm a little busy. We understand. Another pause. Then the girl's voice again, the same one, the one who'd asked if they were going to die. Mr. Thorne? Yes. What's your favorite song? The interceptors were closing in. His display showed 3 of them breaking formation, heading straight for the Hope's hiding spot. In 30 seconds, they'd be in weapons range. My favorite song, Thorne said, is one my mother used to sing. About a ship, and a storm, and not giving up. Can you sing it? The interceptors were 20 seconds out. I'm not a very good singer. We don't mind. 15 seconds. Thorne took a breath. His left hand was cramping from holding the seal. His right hand gripped the controls. His fighter was dying around him, and the children were going to die with it unless he did something impossible. "All right," he said, "but only one verse." He opened the throttle. The interceptors never saw him coming. Thorn launched from behind the hull section at maximum acceleration, all the speed his dying engine could muster, all the fury he had left. The first interceptor didn't have time to react. His cannons, 6% ammunition, aimed with precision born of desperation, tore through its command pod, and it went dark, spiraling into the debris field. 10. The remaining 2 scattered, trying to gain distance, trying to bring their weapons to bear. But Thorn was already inside their formation, weaving between them, using his fighter's smaller profile to stay in their blind spots. His cannons clicked empty. He threw the fighter into a roll, slammed into the second interceptor's hull, not a collision, just a graze, just enough to throw off its aim, and reached for the emergency panel. Manual override. The serpentine ships were organic, grown, vulnerable to things that human ships weren't, like fire, like heat, like the superheated plasma venting from a human fighter's emergency coolant system. Thorn punched the release. Coolant flooded across the second interceptor's hull, not weapons grade, not designed for combat, but hot enough to melt through organic carapace. The interceptor's hull cracked, split, vented atmosphere. Its pilot tried to eject, but the coolant had fused the emergency hatches shut. It died screaming. 9. The third interceptor had gained distance. Its plasma cannon was charging, targeting locked, firing solution complete. Thorn had nothing left. No missiles, no ammunition, no coolant, no shields. An engine that was failing, hull breaches in 3 places, oxygen for maybe 8 more minutes, and 9 interceptors still hunting the hope. He'd promised the children 8 minutes. He'd given them 3. "Mr. Thorn?" The girl's voice trembling. "Are you okay?" The interceptor fired. Thorn didn't dodge. He couldn't. The plasma stream hit his fighter's port engine, the damaged one, the one held together by hope and desperation, and the engine detonated. The explosion threw his fighter into a spin. Alarms merged into a single sustained scream. His cockpit cracked, really cracked this time, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the canopy. His oxygen warning flashed from yellow to red. He was tumbling, out of control, falling toward the debris field, toward the station wreckage, toward the cold embrace of vacuum. "Mr. Thorn?" His left hand was bleeding. He didn't remember when that had happened. The crack in his canopy was leaking atmosphere fast now, not slow, hissing as his oxygen bled into space. He couldn't feel his left foot. "Mr. Thorn, please answer." He tried to reach the controls. His fighter was spinning, the debris field getting closer, the interceptors circling above like vultures waiting for the kill. His oxygen readout, 4 minutes. "Mr. Thorn, I'm scared." Thorn closed his eyes. He thought about the wave through the glass, the 2 quiet voices, the way the children had pressed their hands against the observation bay, watching the human warship with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. He thought about his mother's song, the one about the ship and the storm and not giving up. He opened his eyes. "I'm here," he said. The fighter was still spinning, but he could feel it, the gyroscopic controls, the emergency thrusters, the last scraps of power left in his dying ship. He had 4 minutes of oxygen, 3 minutes until the Hope reached minimum safe distance. 9 interceptors that needed to be stopped. "Hey," he said, his voice calm. So calm. "Remember how I said I wasn't a very good singer?" "Yes?" "I lied." He engaged the emergency thrusters. The debris field became a weapon. Thorn couldn't outfly the interceptors, couldn't outgun them, couldn't outrun them, but he could outthink them. He'd spent 20 years learning how to fly in places where other pilots crashed and burned. He'd spent 20 years learning how to use the environment, how to turn asteroids into cover and debris into ammunition. He'd spent 20 years preparing for a moment like this. The emergency thrusters pushed his fighter into the debris field, not away from it, not through it, but into it. Deep into the heart of the wreckage, where the station's reactor core had once been, where the radiation was still lethal, where the navigational hazards were thick enough to kill. The interceptors followed. They had to. Their commanders had demanded the capture of the children, and Thorn was the only thing standing in their way. They couldn't let him escape. Couldn't let him regroup. Couldn't let him what? There was nothing left. He was flying on fumes and stubbornness, but they didn't know that. And Thorn used their fear against them. He led them through the reactor core, a maze of twisted metal and radioactive debris, corridors too narrow for their ships, turns too sharp for their pilots. The first interporter tried to follow and lost a wing to a support strut. The second tried to brake and was crushed between two spinning debris fields. 7. The third and fourth tried to flank him, splitting up to cover both exits. Thorn flew straight through a radiation cloud, felt his dosimeter spike, felt his skin prickle, felt the first whispers of radiation sickness, and emerged on the other side with the interceptor still behind him. But they were separated now, divided. Thorn killed his engines. The fighter went dark. No power, no emissions, just momentum and inertia and the cold silence of a dead ship. The interceptors shot past him, their sensors blinded by the debris, their pilots confused by the sudden disappearance of their target. Thorn waited. 3 seconds, 5, 10. Then he reactivated his emergency thrusters, the last of his power, the last of his fuel, the last of everything, and fired. His fighter slammed into the fourth interceptor from below, its hull crumpling against the Serpentine's organic armor. Not fast enough to destroy it, just fast enough to push it off course, into the path of the third interceptor. They collided. The explosion was silent. Vacuum swallowed the sound, the heat, the light. But Thorn felt it through his controls, the shockwave, the debris, the death of 2 more enemies. 5. His oxygen readout 1 minute. His fighter was dead. Truly dead. No engines, no thrusters, no power, just a cockpit and a pilot and the cold certainty of vacuum. Mr. Thorn? The girl's voice, smaller now, almost gone. The engines are online. We're moving. We're going to make it. Thorn smiled. That's good, he said. Mr. Thorn, where are you? Why can't we see you? He looked at his display. The Vanaki's hope was accelerating slowly, painfully, but accelerating. Away from the gravity well, away from the debris field, away from the interceptors, away from him. I'm right here, he said. I'm just resting for a moment. We're coming back for you. No. His voice was firm enough to surprise him. You're not. You're going to keep flying. You're going to take those children somewhere safe, somewhere the Serpentines can't find them. But Mr. Thorn, that's an order. Silence. Then softer. You're not our commander. No, Thorn agreed. I'm not. Another pause. Then the caretaker's voice, older and more tired than he'd ever heard it. Lieutenant Commander Thorn, the children want to know if you'll sing for them. One last time. Thorn's oxygen readout. 30 seconds. His cockpit was cold. So cold. The crack in his canopy had spread, and he could see the debris field through it, the stars beyond, the distant shape of the Vanaki's hope growing smaller as it fled. He thought about his mother, about the song she'd sung, the one that had carried him through every dark moment of his life. He opened his mouth, and he sang. The storm came down on the ship that night. The waves rose high and the crew took flight, but the captain stood on the deck alone and faced the dark with a heart of stone. His voice cracked. He didn't care. He said, I will not leave this wheel, though the ocean screams and the thunder peals, for there are souls in the hold below, and I'll see them safe through the wind and snow. The children were listening. He could feel them, all 247 of them, huddled together in the Hope's common area, their 2 large eyes fixed on the comm speaker, his oxygen readout. 15 seconds. The ship went down at the break of day, but the souls survived to sail away, and they tell the tale of the captain's stand, who gave his life for a stranger's land. The cockpit was growing dark. His vision was blurring. He couldn't feel his hands anymore, couldn't feel anything except the cold and the fading light. Mr. Thorn? His oxygen readout, 5 seconds. Yeah? Thank you. Thorn closed his eyes. He thought about the wave through the glass, the two quiet voices, the way the children had pressed their hands against the observation bay, and he smiled. They found him 3 hours later, a salvage team dispatched by the Vanaki's hope against all orders, against all logic, against everything command had told them to do. They found his fighter drifting in the debris field, its hull blackened and scarred, its cockpit frozen, its systems dead. They found his body still in the seat, his hand still pressed against the canopy crack, his face peaceful in a way that made the salvage master cry. They found the recording, his final transmission, the song he'd sung, the words he'd spoken to the children, to the caretaker, to everyone who'd listened. They played it for the hope. And the children, the last Vanaki children, the survivors of a genocide, the ones who'd seen everything and lost everyone, listened in silence. And when the recording ended, the oldest of them, a girl of 12, the one who'd asked about the music, the one who'd begged him to eject, stood up. "We're going to remember him," she said. "We're going to tell his story, to our children, and their children, and everyone we meet, for as long as our species survives." She looked at the stars, the cold, indifferent stars that had taken so much from her people. "We're going to remember the human who refused to eject." Epilogue. The Vanaki's hope reached Allied space 6 days later. It docked with a human relief station, one of the few that hadn't turned them away, and the children were taken to medical bays, to counseling centers, to shelters where they could sleep without fear. The caretaker gave a statement to the press. She talked about the escort fleet that had abandoned them, the serpentines that had hunted them, the command that had written them off. And she talked about the pilot, the one who'd stayed, the one who'd fought, the one who'd sung to dying children while his own oxygen ran out. The story went viral across human space. The footage from the Hope's external cameras showing a single damaged fighter, weaving through a debris field, taking on 17 enemies alone, was watched by 3 billion people in the first hour. Command issued a statement. A medal was awarded posthumously. A memorial was built, a small one, in a quiet corner of a military cemetery. But the real memorial was on the Vanaki's Hope. The children had renamed their ship. They'd painted new letters on the hull, in 4 languages, in bright colors that could be seen from across the system. The Thorn, and beneath it, in smaller letters, "He refused to leave us. We will never forget." In the years that followed, the Vanaki species slowly rebuilt. They found other survivors, hidden refuges, pockets of their people scattered across the galaxy. And every child born to their species learned the story of the human pilot who died so they could live. They learned his name, they learned his song, and they learned what it meant to refuse to eject even when everything, even when everyone, told you to let go. Because sometimes, letting go is the only thing you can't do. Sometimes holding on is the only thing that matters, and sometimes one human, just one, is enough to change everything.